What's up, guys? I'm Bantamweight MMA, and today we're talking about the scariest fighters in every UFC weight class. These are the guys whose aura is absolutely terrifying for their opponents, the fighters that have both intimidating personalities, looks, and just overall presence, but also the fighters that have those performances that make future opponents think twice about facing them. The kind of fighters that have legitimate health consequences after fighting them. So we will be picking one fighter from each weight division in the UFC, starting at flyweight and working our way up to heavyweight. I am going to try to avoid listing the champion of the division as the scariest fighter if possible, but I can't make any promises, okay? Anyways, let's get started with the flyweights. So for flyweight, guys, I have Manel Kape being the scariest flyweight in the division, especially after his round one knockout over Brandon Royval. And beyond that, I think his personality is absolutely hilarious, but it is also pretty intimidating. He's extremely aggressive. He's always getting in altercations outside of the actual octagon. He was getting in Israel Adesanya's face during the Sydney, Australia press conference. He was getting into altercations with Muhammad Makayev, where I think they actually were fighting each other outside of the octagon at the PI. So he's an absolute nutcase. He is one of the few flyweights who is an actual big boy, even though he's like 5'3", and he wears the pants in the flyweight division. He's definitely the scariest fighter based on performance. He's one of the few flyweights who has the power to knock people out and consistently do so. That's actually what he's trying to do in most of his fights. So I think you have to put Manel Kape at that scariest fighter position for the flyweight division. That being said, though, the honorable mention for the flyweight division is Alessandro Pantoja. Now, the reason I didn't put Pantoja as the boogeyman, as the scariest fighter in the division is yes, we don't want to put champions in that position, but he's no longer champ anymore. And it's kind of because of his loss. I know some people aren't going to like that because it was injury, and it's not just because of the loss. It's the way that loss happened. Watching Pantoja grimace in pain and put his hands up kind of like defenseless, asking the ref to stop the fight, and then he's holding onto his elbow and just like super defeated. To me, I know the optics of that, this is going to make me sound like an asshole, but the optics of that are not of someone who is the scariest flyweight in the division. So it has to be Manel Kape. He's definitely the toughest bastard there is. And so, yeah, moving on to the bantamweight division, I went ahead and put Davis and Figueiredo. I know some people are going to disagree with that, but if you look at the actual division, there is no one in bantamweight who is scarier than Figueiredo, even though Figgy is in his Unk era. I know that Figueiredo has not really gotten, I don't think he's gotten a single knockout in bantamweight yet, or has he? No, he hasn't. But that being said, I do think some of his performances from flyweight carryover, where if you've seen those, especially against what was his name, Joseph Benavidez, those were absolutely freaking terrifying finishes. The way I think Benavidez was literally screaming out and crying after the submission, where he's going like like uncontrollably. That's how bad Davis and Figueiredo beat him up. So I think you have to give Figgy that position. His power, his aura, the kind of personality, the character he brings, that God of War personality, that fight style of just kind of shelling up and moving forward, throwing heavy, to me is super interesting. His instinct for a finish is super strong, and I think for all those reasons, he's definitely the most scary fighter in the bantamweight division. Moving on to our honorable mentions, we have the terrifying Raul Rosas and Patchy Mix. No, I'm just kidding. Patchy Mix is like the opposite of a scary fighter. I think he might be the softest and least scary fighter in bantamweight, and then Raul Rosas is probably the scariest looking fighter in UFC history. The mug on that kid is absolutely insane. But our actual honorable mention is going to be Peter Yan. Again, the only reason I didn't put Peter Yan as the straight up scariest fighter in the division is because he's the champion. But why I think he's one of the scariest fighters in the division is because Peter Yan, his personality is so calm and collected and stoic that he kind of he reminds me of the literal Terminator, like an Eastern European Terminator. Even his fight style, he kind of just shells up. He puts his high guard up, and every time you throw at him, he throws 3 or 4 back on the counter. He blitzes. He has nasty leg kicks. He has nasty kicks in general. I mean, his stand-up is excellent, and he always throws with intention. He's trying to really hurt his opponents. He's not trying to win the fight. He's trying to beat you up in every single fight he has. So yeah, I think Peter Yan is definitely an easy honorable mention. And yeah, and Davison Figueiredo is our scariest fighter in the Bantamweight division. Moving on next to Featherweight. For Featherweight, I selected Diego Lopez, and this one was actually a little bit tougher. I know some people are going to disagree with me. I don't entirely blame them because there is a lot of fighters in this weight class that could definitely pass for the position. But I think when it comes to Diego Lopez, you have to look at his performances and the way he beats people. Not necessarily the fact that he's a very respectful fighter and he might be considered a good guy more than a quote-unquote bad guy. He still does have an intimidating aura where, you know, he has that like emo vibe, that kind of mysterious, like he tips the cowboy hat down so you can't see his eyes. He gets all serious and, you know, he's going to try and go and finish you. So I think that can be a little intimidating. But mostly it's his performances, guys. It's the way that in most of his fights, he's getting a finish, and he's every single one of his fights, if he doesn't finish you, he is trying to finish you. Like Brian Ortega. I don't know if I was Brian Ortega, I think I would have preferred to have gotten knocked out by that punch in the first round instead of getting woken up mid, I guess, knockout. But I think because of that, you have to put Diego Lopez there. I think he's absolutely brutalizing most of the top 10 out, or I guess most of the division outside of the top 5. And then even within the top 5, as we can clearly see, he's been able to have very, very competitive fights, and he has decisions that he either wins or he's forcing you, kind of like Evloev, to really earn that victory. And so I think he is the scariest fighter in the division. I think if you were standing across from Diego Lopez, you are definitely sweating bullets a little bit because you know you're going to have a very, very tough fight. But for our honorable mentions, this is where people, I think, I could see some disagreement. We have Josh Emmett and Jean Silva. So a lesser extent, the scariest fighter in this division is Jean Silva. I could see some people arguing that he's the scariest fighter, but I think his, I guess, fight personality, his fight character is more cringe than anything. The barking, the over emotions are pretty, some of it's cringe, but I do think some of it does mentally get to his opponents, and it does kind of, I guess, throw them off their game and intimidate them. I think, for example, when he hits you with a vicious combo and then he dabs you up, gives you a hug, and like apologizes, kind of like he did against who was it, Melsik Bagdadarian. I can't even pronounce that guy's last name. I'm not even gonna try. But yeah, I think Jan Silva, based on his pure violence and his like autistic Spurg Lord psychopath personality, could be one of them. But definitely more so than Jan Silva, in my opinion, and possibly more so than Diego Lopez, is Josh Emmett. No, is Josh Emmett beating most of his opponents at this point in his career, and even historically, I guess, in the top 10? Not really. But when he beats his opponent, guys, he's getting a potential knockout of the year. He's getting, you know, that Bryce Mitchell knockout, to me, was one of the scariest knockouts I've ever seen in featherweight. And so, yeah, and not to forget, Josh Emmett does look like a Falmer, and so if you're getting knocked out by a jacked Falmer, and you're going to wake up in the hospital, that's a pretty terrifying prospect. So I think if you're standing across the cage from Josh Emmett, you're definitely shaking in your boots a little bit. That is a stressful fight. That is not a fight that a lot of fighters are going to take on short notice, for example. That's something that fighters are going to want to prepare for very heavily. Moving on to the next division, we have lightweight. And for lightweight, guys, I went ahead and went with BSD, Benoit Saint Denis. In case you guys didn't notice, Benoit is the, or Benway, the channel name, is the Americanized version of the name Benoit. So shout out BSD. There's no bias there, I pinky promise. But yeah, BSD, I think, guys, what it really, really comes down to is A, his performances, and his Marauder Berserker fight style is obviously pretty scary to fight. You know that you're going to get into a pretty violent matchup where there's not going to be any point fighting when you're going up against BSD. But beyond that, guys, this dude was literally former special forces with France. I forgot the specific unit. I looked it up a while ago, but he has medals for like combat and stuff. Like, this dude has probably killed people, and he knows how to kill people. The UFC and MMA fighting in general is not the most stressful thing he's ever done in his life. It's not the most, I guess, risky thing he's ever done in his life. And so because of that, knowledge of like this dude would be willing to kill you potentially in the ring if he wanted to, or if there was no ref, is pretty scary to me. And he has that just like very quiet and mysterious personality as well. And so, you know, I think it's very arguable that BSD is the scariest lightweight in the division. But for our honorable mentions, guys, we have Manuel Torres and of course the champion Ilia Topuria. So I think Topuria as an honorable mention speaks for itself, and the reason we don't have him as the straight up scariest fighter, because I totally think he could be, is because he's the champion. But yeah, it speaks for itself because of his performances, the way he knocks people out, the fact that he's knocking everyone out, the fact that the guys he's knocking out, most of them, or not most of them, but at least Max Holloway hadn't been knocked out before. Alexander Volkanovski, even then, we had seen him knocked out by Islam Makhachev, but that was on short notice. Seeing him get knocked out cleanly with no excuses by Ilia Topuria was pretty surprising. But moving on to Manuel Torres, it's a somewhat similar story to Ilia Topuria, except I would argue Manuel has a little bit more of a scary and intimidating aura. He kind of has like that Hispanic machismo, like mean mug, just like fuck you attitude. His nickname is literally El Loco, and that's how he fights. This man is crazy. All of his wins in the UFC are by first round knockout. I think only one of them is not a knockout, and it was a submission against Chris Duncan, which is that win's aging very well. And he comes to bring it. You know, if he's not getting the finish in the first round, he's getting finished in the first round. And so he's one of those kill or be killed fighters. And I think with his recent performances against Grant Dawson and Drew Dober, you know, he's definitely closing in on being one of the scariest fighters in the division. The only reason I can't put him at number one is because the strength of his competition, the strength of schedule isn't as strong as these other fighters. Diego Lopez is doing this to guys at the top of the division. He's doing it to guys like John Silva, whereas Manuel Torres is doing it to guys who are no longer ranked in the division. So I cannot give that to him. Next up, we have welterweight. And for welterweight, this was actually the toughest one for me to determine, but we have Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think this one is mostly based off aura. We have that like Mongolian vibe, that step horse rider, just complete, like, just this dude would have, you know, Joe Rogan on them. This guy would have rode in on a horse and stolen your family. He would have killed your entire village. And it's true. I mean, and he's a very intimidating. He doesn't speak English, which I think contributes towards that aura. But before Ian Gary, he had 100% finish rate. So he has a 90+% finish rate in the UFC. All of those fights, he plays the hammer, basically, where he is putting the pressure on the opponent. He's looking for the finish. He's putting them in uncomfortable positions or situations. And when the opponent makes a mistake or basically folds, he takes them there. He finishes them. He does not give them an out. And so, yeah, I think that aura, he's also undefeated, which adds to it. It feels like beating Shavkat is very tall glass to order or to drink or whatever the term is. I completely fucked that one up. But for our honorable mentions, we have Carlos Prates and Michael Morales. I was seriously considering Carlos Prates and putting him above Shavkat, but I think because Shavkat is more of a contender and he's undefeated, that we have got to put Shavkat above Carlos. I mean, Shavkat beat Ian Gary, and Ian Gary dominated Carlos Prates. I know he lost that fifth round, almost finished in that fifth round, but I can't justify putting CP over Shavkat. And then Morales, I think his performances and resume definitely show he's a scary fighter. His style is definitely someone of a scary fighter. But he's got, like, honestly, a flamboyant, like, Gen Z personality. So it's kind of just personality-wise, he's not that guy. He's pretty nice. He's pretty flamboyant. He's pretty out there. And so because of that, I just cannot give it to Morales. Moving on to middleweight. This is one of the few divisions where I had to give it to the champion just because it's like the gap between Khamzat Chimaev and anyone else in this division when it comes to just like that intimidation factor and how scary he is so far that I just could not justify putting Khamzat not in that position. I mean, we look at his performances, they're absolutely terrifying. We've seen all the photos of him making those fucking batshit insane faces in the octagon. We know he's got a few screws loose. He will fight anyone, anywhere, anytime, any place. Even in situations where, like, I think he's got autism or something, where in situations where, I don't think you can react that way, he's picking fights. Like with Darren Till, and not Ian Buckley, the Buck. Joaquin Buckley. He started beefing with Joaquin Buckley. Fight me now. You want to fight? Fight me now. Same thing with Ian Gary. Like, this guy's a crash out. He can back up the crash out personality with just insane amounts of skill. I will say the DDP fight definitely took away from that scary aura, because he's really not going for that finish and that high octane pace we just don't see anymore. It's more of a lay-in prayer. But I won't hold that against him too much. It was DDP who is one of the best finishers in the division. And so, yeah, I still think we have to consider Khamzat Chimaev the scariest fighter in the division. Moving on to our honorable mention, we have Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I love Fluffy, guys. I think he just has that rough and tough personality. Obviously, he's a cardio merchant. He absolutely grinds guys down. And I think that's why we have to give it to him, is obviously his resume is pretty fucking stellar ever since the beginning of his career, where I think he went, win, loss, and then he's ever since then been on his big win streak. But I think it's the way he breaks guys down is pretty terrifying to me, guys, and is what I consider, like, for him to be scary about, is he doesn't finish guys quickly. Like, you're not, like, I know waking up in the hospital or just like a 10-15 second flurry of punches and you're done, like, that sucks, and it sucks because there's like medical and health consequences. But Anthony Hernandez is death by 1,000 cuts. He's going to make you hate the fact that you even accepted a fight with him, and then he's going to finish you either way. And so that's a pretty, I don't think in the first round you're sitting there going like, oh, Anthony Hernandez is scary. I think most fighters are pretty confident they think they can beat him. I think by round 3, most fighters are dreading getting off the stool, and they're shitting bricks at the fact that they have to continue this fight against Anthony Hernandez. And so for those reasons, I think he is the sole honorable mention in this division, despite the fact that there is some pretty scary characters in the division. I just don't think they have the personality or styles for it or the resumes, but Anthony Hernandez definitely does. Moving on to the next weight class at light heavyweight, we have Bogdan Guskov, Agent 47. So I think, especially after his last fight, I know he lost it, and it was, or not lost, but it went to a draw against Jan Blachowicz, but the aura he bought with the Agent 47 get up was pretty hilarious. And before that, he was on like 4-fight win streak against, Zach Paga, Ryan Spann, Nikita Krylov. And I think all of those were in the first or second round, which is pretty interesting. And he just has like that evil Anthony Smith look to him that I think is pretty funny. And again, he's another one of those Eastern Europeans where he just looks like some dude. He looks like an enforcer for like the Russian mafia or something. And if you combine that with his finishing instinct and his resume, I do think it's pretty easy to see him as the light heavyweight scariest fighter. I don't think you can have anyone else. I mean, there's other fighters who do have similar finishing potential and good resumes, like Yuri. But Yuri's our artistic samurai. He's a very honorable and respectful fighter. He's not as intimidating to me as Bogdan, both in looks or in personality. But for our honorable mention, guys, it has to be Alex Pereira. I wanted to, again, put him as the scariest fighter in the division, but I just did not want another champ taking that position. But for him, it's based off his stoic personality. He doesn't talk. He's Chama. He's like a rock. Hands of stone for a reason as well. He knocks basically every single fighter out that he fights and has a win against. But yeah, it's just the fact that he's going to finish you most likely if you fight him, and the whole time he's going to stare you down. He's going to look like a Brazilian hitman, and then he's going to snipe you with a left, and you're done. And so I definitely think it could have been Alex Pereira, but again, I didn't want him taking that position from someone else. And so moving on to the next weight class, we have heavyweight. And so for this one, I couldn't stick to that rule, guys. I had to break it. We got Tom Aspinall as the scariest fighter in the division. And let me explain why, because some people are going to argue with me on that one, and I don't agree at all with any arguments that you guys can make. So some I guess, mentions that people might make. Sergey Pavlovich has been gun shy ever since Tom Aspinall whooped his ass, and so I just cannot give it to Pavlovich. Pavlovich crying like a baby after Volkov whipped his ass is also not a great look. Maybe 3 years ago, Sergey Pavlovich could be the most intimidating fighter in the division, but not anymore. Who else? Derek Lewis. I could totally see it, except for the fact that his personality is that of like the drunk funkle at the barbecue. He's making jokes, guys. He's kind of a comedian. He does have like that knockout power, but being the scariest fighter isn't just being like the biggest knockout artist to me. So I don't think it's Derek Lewis. And if you look at the top of the division, I guess you have like a Cyril Gane. Baguette Finger Gane, I don't think deserves it either because he's a decision merchant. He has no power. And I know I just said that power doesn't factor into it too much. But I don't think you can have pillow hands and be the scariest fighter in the division either. Volkov, he's another one. He's just a quiet, kind of nerdy guy, nerdy Russian guy. He's the skyscraper. But he, again, kind of a decision merchant. He doesn't get finishes very often. Curtis Blades is another just like socially awkward, and I'd hate to say it. He does have a lisp. I guess like blame anyone who has a lisp or hate anyone who has a lisp. But it does take away from your aura if you're like stuttering and you have that kind of like Mike Tyson voice, which Curtis Blades definitely has. And then Waldo Cortez Acosta. I mean, he's just a pudgy, fat black guy, dude. And he literally like, his nickname is Salsa Boy, and like his whole getup is like dancing and like emoting and shit. Like, I don't think he's scary. Like, I know he's been on a little streak recently of knockouts. But before that, that guy was a fucking decision merchant, dude. I've lost so much money against Acosta because he looked like dog shit when he went to the UFC. He would just out-decision guys for somehow, and I thought most of them were close. So I genuinely had never thought this dude would hit the top 5. I thought he would just be a bottom feeder and eventually just be a heavyweight slopster that eventually got cut, but I guess not. I guess he's going to be potentially fighting for the title eventually. Anyways, guys, that is all the scariest fighters for every weight division in the UFC. Ouch. I just smacked the fuck out of my funny bone. But yeah, if you agree or disagree, make sure to comment below. But if you like this kind of content, make sure to comment and or like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be making videos pretty much every day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.